Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for this very exciting informational workshop. We're happy to be with you this afternoon for these next 90 minutes to learn all about the California Conservation Corps and how probation departments can partner with the Conservation Corps to serve young people on probation and help them to be successful. And so before we get started and I introduce our speaker, just want to go over a few housekeeping items. We will take questions at the end. We do anticipate having plenty of time for those. And so as you have questions, if you're afraid you might forget them, feel free to type them into the chat, or at the conclusion of Director Saito's presentation, you can also raise your hand and we can take questions that way because we are on the Zoom format, which allows for that. So very much appreciate everyone's time today, but also ask if you could please stay muted during the presentation. That will refrain from picking up some background noise from your offices. And then the last and probably the most frequently asked question is we will send out the PowerPoint at the conclusion of the workshop. So please do keep an eye out for that. I think with that, I will introduce our speaker. We have Director Saito with the California Conservation Corps. He is going to review the different aspects of the program and how his program can be of benefit to the young people that we serve. And so, Director Saito, very excited to have you here with us. We have probation departments from throughout the state serving both juveniles and adults on probation. So a very broad audience, and very much look forward to the information that you will be sharing with us and then the discussion that will ensue afterwards. So I think with that, I will turn it over to you.
Great. Thank you, Rosie, and thank you, Mackenzie, for having me today. I look forward to talking and engaging all of you in a discussion about the California Conservation Corps. I also realize that, I've been talking to many of you, or I've been trying to meet and talk with many of you. Not a lot because of the changes in DJJ and the urgency as the Stockton and Ventura DJJ sites closed and Pine Grove. But also, also know that this is a discussion for all young adults on probation. So not just for transitioning DJJ youth. So with that, next slide. The CCC has been kind of shying away from our motto here, but I thought it would be appropriate for this group. Many of you have heard or seen this: hard work, low pay, miserable conditions, and more. Next slide. The CCC, we're about impacting young folks' lives and transforming lives of young adults, and at the same time, and I think that's what makes the CCC unique, is that we're not only transforming lives of young adults, but we're at the same time protecting and enhancing California's natural environment, and making California a better place for all to live. Next slide. The CCC was established in July of 1976, so that means in a couple months we'll be around for 47 years. It was Governor Brown's, first time Governor Jerry Brown's vision at that time to create an organization that was part a Jesuit seminary where people could think about their actions, think about what they were doing in life. At the same time, it mixed in this kind of Israeli kibbutz where people all worked together, worked and strived for a common goal. And then to make it even more what the CCC is today, even back then, wanted to have that kind of Marine Corps boot camp kind of environment. Next slide, please. And the early visionaries were B.T. Collins. Actually, the second CCC director was Leroy Chatfield, who's not in this picture, but Leroy was responsible for opening 18 residential centers in 18 months. Broke every rule in the state book, but got centers up and running. And then he was followed by B.T. Collins. And I think that's where the really hard work, miserable conditions, low pay kind of motto came into play. And then Jack Dugan, a retired New York City cop, kind of reinforced that tough love kind of attitude or mentality. Next slide, please. For decades, the CCC for now 47 years has performed. We're the largest conservation corps in the nation. We've trained and worked with over 120, I believe it's probably 130,000 young folks And we've provided more than 75 million hours of public service resource conservation work. Next slide, please. Our mission is to protect and enhance California's natural resources and communities while empowering and developing young adults through hard work and education. Next slide, please. And to do that, we have this kind of, our motto is this three-prong approach, 3 C's, volunteerism and partners. Next slide. So the 3 C's are building character, having young folks obtain these credentials through a really strong commitment to that same mission of the CCC. Next slide. And we do that by partnering. These are just 5 of many, many partners. These are at a state level, but our partners where we implement these natural resource community conservation work projects are through state, federal, city and county and nonprofit entities all throughout the state. Next slide. And we also do this through, the part of it's not just the work training, the job experience, but also the opportunity to serve. And so we do that through volunteer service projects with nonprofit groups, with environmental groups, with all kinds of groups throughout the state of California. Next slide. This is there are 2 slides that are out of date. My apologies. This was last year's budget to the 22-23 California Conservation Corps budget is now $175 million. Next slide. Again, we transform lives while protecting and enhancing California's environment. So for a lot of young folks, not everyone, but there's that maybe you were a young person that didn't know what you wanted to do in life, or maybe you're a young person that just hadn't found that your kind of niche, or you're a young person that really was looking to do something of value and of importance, and that's something that motivates you. So again, we're providing that work experience, that outdoor opportunity for young folks as they learn and develop their skills. And they're at every moment, at every turn of the project site, we try to instill that message that you're doing something for yourself, but you're also doing for some of those communities that, for the people I'm speaking to today, maybe some of those communities that you've destroyed or you haven't been an active and positive influence in those communities. And so this is your opportunity to that restorative justice model. Next slide, please. We are more than 1,600 Corps members strong throughout the state. We cover 25 centers. Next slide, please. 25 centers, of which 9 are residential. And a typical residential center is about 90 to 100 people living, working together, going to school, educating, and growing up together. Again, 9 residential centers all throughout the state. The furthest south being Los Pinos Center, located above Lake Elsinore, and our Camarillo Center in Ventura County. This is another slide that's not up to date. The stipend now is $2,000. It's not an hourly wage. It's a stipend. It's $2,700 a month, of which we take $500 out for essentially room and board if you're assigned to a residential center. Each young person, not their family, but at least the young person receives full health benefits, and they can earn up to $8,000 in scholarships and many other opportunities to finish your high school diploma if you don't have that, and other personal and development support as well. Next slide, please. This is our breakdown of our demographics of the Corps. I really, and maybe inaccurate, I really lumped that 38% of non-specified into, it makes up probably a larger than 70% of BIPOC communities. Next slide, please. We're 24% women. I'd love to be 50%, but then 24% is probably as low as 20% sometimes. But we really feel, I really feel this is an opportunity for many women that are pursuing those kind of non-traditional employment roles that sometimes women are not either avoid or just don't have the same opportunities that the guys do, but 24% women. Next slide. Our COMET is our Corps member orientation, motivation, education, and training. So every person, every Corps member that enters the California Conservation Corps Corps goes through a 1 to 2 week COMET. So it's our kind of orientation and training session. That COMETs usually occur at the first or second week of the month. And each of the centers that I spoke to, the 25 centers, including residential centers, they fill their COMETs, or they bring on COMETs, depending on the numbers that they need to fill at that particular center. So they might happen every month, they might happen every other month, they might happen every few months, again, depending on each center's recruitment needs. Next slide, please. There's specialized training, on-the-job training, classroom. I think that's a real value. The other great value of the Conservation Corps is that folks are learning on the job, but they're actually still performing a service, whether it's enhancing environmental restoration projects, or in this case, you're building scaffolding to do an energy efficiency project, but they're learning on the job. And so on the job means it's a classroom setting while they're actually performing that valuable service projects. Next slide, please. We work in crews, and sometimes in smaller specialized crews where maybe a building construction site can't handle a full crew of 15 or 18. So there might be a smaller crew of 2 or 3, but we work in crews throughout the state. Next slide, please. What we do. Next slide. We're mandated by a public resource code to respond to emergencies. So that includes earthquake, fires, floods, oil spills. The pest infestation is eradication of the Mediterranean fruit fly. A lot of work in Southern California, but really throughout the state, and other man-made and natural disasters. Currently today, we're at our 6th day of work, probably of a 10-day or 14-day project assignment where we're doing wave channel levee restoration work in Corcoran. We have about 6 crews, or about 85 Corps members out, working 12-hour shifts, staying and living in the area, again, on a 10 to 14-day assignment on this levee restoration work, because as you know, from the many months, winter months of storm damage. Next slide, please. We, of course, respond to fires. Last year was a slower fire season than the previous 2, as all of you, I think, know. We probably only did about 500,000 Corps member hours in fire response, and that includes 40 fire camps, which will be in the next slide. But we've already made up for some of that fiscal year with a couple 100,000 hours of unusual storm-related emergency work in January, February, and March. Next slide. And of course, a lot of those emergency response hours are providing many hours of fire camp support. So this is in many ways, the hard work part, but also I think the motivating kind of work that the CCC does. It's not for everybody, but for those that can work, a 16-hour shift on an emergency and a fire camp support like this, work a 16-hour shift, get up, go to work at 6 in the morning, bed down at 10 o'clock at night, do that 5 days, 10 days, 14, 21 days in a row on emergency, usually where it's smoky and hot on a fire, and living with, but supporting 5,000 other fire supporters. That's really, I think, where folks really find out about themselves, that it's not just the mental and physical aspect of an assignment like that, but it's really, if you can get behind that you're really helping thousands of other firefighters and firefighter support staff, to save property and life. And if you can do that, and that, motivates you to get up this 3rd day and the 7th day and the 14th day, it really goes a lot towards building that character and that discipline that many young folks lack today. Next slide, please. And of course, we do flood protection. I mentioned that we're doing, this is the kind of levee repair that we're doing, repairing 7 miles of the levee just like this in Corcoran. Again, we're 85 Corps members, 6 crews are working day and night. Next slide, please. And of course, wildland firefighting. When I came back to the Conservation Corps in 2015, we had no Type 1 firefighting crews with CAL FIRE. Today, we have 28 Type 1 CAL FIRE firefighting crews throughout the state. We'll have 4 more by the end of next fiscal year, where Corps members are really learning about the fire services. And this has really helped in our recruitment especially during the COVID period, because the pandemic period, because, when young folks weren't returning to school, or young folks weren't returning to work for whatever reason, the word got out that, wow, if you can do a fire season, and if you can pass the wildland firefighting test, PAC test, it's not guaranteed, but there's a very good chance, an opportunity that you do a season, you go through all that training, that you can be picked up as a seasonal firefighter with CAL FIRE, who's hiring, about 1,000 seasonal firefighters every year. And if you do that first step, then you can get training to work at a municipal fire department, or be a permanent CAL FIRE fire captain, and so on, and move your way up the ranks. Next slide, please. And then, of course, that wildland firefighting is, again, what I've talked about and what we do. And it's a great opportunity. And it's really, a lot of young folks want to do that, pursue this career, not just with CAL FIRE, but with the United States Forest Service. Probably many of you have read in the paper where the Forest Service is really behind, but dedicating many services to not just firefighters, but all throughout the United States Forest Service, the Bureau of Land Management, and other federal agencies around wildland firefighting, but also recreation and trail construction as well. Next slide, please. So we also have a specialty program. We have an Energy Corps. We have a site in Sacramento at our Burkett Center. We have an Energy Corps site at our Norwalk Center. Norwalk Center has a satellite in San Diego, in Vista, and the Sacramento site has a satellite operation in Fresno. So young folks are specializing in energy efficiency work. In this case, you're seeing a young person do a LED lights change out. And again, there's a multi-purpose effect here. A young person is performing a job at a school, or a state building, or a nonprofit group, or maybe after doing these LED light change outs, there's a 20 to 30% energy savings. And at the same time, they're learning valuable skills where there's lots of opportunities in this field. There's lots of opportunities in solar installation, EV charger station installation, and so on and so on. So, and then you're providing a great service to the community. If a school site can save 30% on their energy costs, then that money can be put back into school programs that really benefit the students and the young folks. Next slide, please. Again, Energy Corps program, great and valuable training that young folks receive, either in partnership with utility companies like SMUD, or community colleges, or private companies that do environmental services like these kinds of projects. Next slide, please. We launched a forest health program we called Forestry Corps. So we have a number of crews working throughout the state that are focusing not on fire protection, but on healthy forests. And that means removing fuels to prevent catastrophic fires, reforestation after catastrophic fires. We're also working in plant nurseries throughout the state, primarily though in Davis at the CAL FIRE Moran Nursery in Southern California with the National Park Service. Next slide, please. So this is the forest health programs that we do. These are early years, and we still focus a lot of work in the Southern Sierras, where many of you probably heard that this became a big issue after many years of drought, where we were having bark beetle infestation, as well as dead and dying trees. Over 1 million dead and dying trees in the Sierras, and so our crews are helping remove those vulnerable forests, cutting down dead and dying trees, and thinning out the forests to reducing those fuel loads. Next slide, please. Another specialty program for 44 years we launched. It's the 44th year that we launched our backcountry program. So we take more than 80 young folks from the CCC and also from throughout the United States, and put them for 5 months in the backcountry, where there's totally away from Wi-Fi, have no internet connections. They're off the grid. They live and work as a team of 15 to 18 young folks And a typical day is, well, first, when they get into the backcountry, it's been more challenging this year because of the winter storms. But when they get into the backcountry, they'll hike as 5 to 10 miles into the backcountry, set up camp where they'll live for then 3 to 4 or 5 months. And then on their weekend, and then they'll hike a mile or two or more to a project to do these kinds of trail work. And then on the weekends, they get some of the greatest opportunities to explore, whether it's Yosemite or Sequoia, Kings Canyon, Klamath, Shasta Trinity, the most beautiful landscapes in the state of California, probably in the United States. Next slide, please. And it's incredible, grueling work, but it's incredibly rewarding. Where again, folks, it's at first it's the physical, difficult part of the work, but then it's the emotional, the internal kind of discussions that one has with themselves while they're sitting out in the middle of this beautiful country. They got time to reflect about what they're doing in life and what they want to do in the future in their lives. Next slide, please. Another specialty program we have, I said we have 9 residential centers. So those centers with 90 young folks, they've got to eat. And so we have a culinary specialty programs where young folks can go into natural resource conservation work, or they can also go into a culinary arts program where they get additional training, sometimes partner with the local community college, and then develop those skills. And we really specifically program that training towards some of the entry-level positions, not just in the state, but and working with restaurants and establishments and all different kind of venues. Next slide, please. And that culinary program, I think, is really popular with many folks, and it gives them, we teach them a lot of different skills. Another good example of a partnership with community colleges. So we have a residential center in South Lake Tahoe, and so we partner directly with South Lake Tahoe Community College, where they're again advancing or enhancing their skills, their technical skills, as they gain valuable hands-on experience. They got to serve and prepare meals for 90 folks every day at our residential centers. Next slide, please. Another really hallmark of the work of the CCC is we do a lot of trail building and maintenance work with California State Parks and the National Park Service, another land resource management agency, and it gives young folks a great opportunity to develop those skills. And many of I don't have statistics or data or numbers, but I would bet if you run into a National Park Service crew in Yosemite or Sequoia or Kings Canyon, or a state parks crew, or if you've hiked a state parks trail, it's probably been worked on by the California Conservation Corps sometime in our 47-year history. Next slide, please. And then we do a lot of natural habitat restoration. That includes landscaping and maintenance work, in this case, removing non-natives, but really to not just beautify these medians and roadways, but to really restore natural habitat to many of our wetlands and natural habitat areas. Next slide, please. We work heavily with Fish and Wildlife, both at a federal and state level and at a local level. We have a veterans corps, so the CCC recruits young adults, 18 to 25, or up to 29 if you're a vet. And so we have about 10 or 15 vets that are serving in our fisheries, habitat fisheries program, as well as a specialized program called Watershed Stewardship Program. It's AmeriCorps funded. Every year we bring on about 40 AmeriCorps members that most have their BA or master's degree, but they've been in school for 14 or 16 years. And so by participating in the WSP internship, they get hands-on and practical experience partnering with or interning with Fish and Wildlife, or Noro Fisheries, or other fish and wildlife agencies or organizations, where they get to really hone their skills and on-the-job training. Next slide, please. And then there's all kinds of other traditional or additional training certificate programs. They're listed here. It's not just getting getting a red card in wildland fire training and production, but also in first aid, CPR, Cal OSHA 10, HAZWOPER training, and many, many other certificates, that you hear about, those stackable certificates that all help that person towards a career. Next slide, please. And of course, at all of our sites, if you don't have a high school, if you come to us without a high school diploma, we require you to attend about 10 hours a week after school at our John Muir Charter High School or our Urban Core Charter High School in San Diego. And so that's about 25% of our population that come to us without a high school diploma. And then if you have your high school diploma, we really still require you to, if not enroll at a community college, take additional classes that we provide that, again, develop and hone your post-secondary education skills. Next slide, please. So, it's all about, again, building the person. And there's just, again, I can't stress enough. This is a trail, I think, at Torrey Pines. It's not just scraping some dirt and some grass away. It's really detailed and complicated and really strong trail building skills. But that's just the kind of surface activity that's happening. While that's happening, a person's developing that personal growth, and they're learning about life, and they're learning how to work with others that they, for the most part, don't know. And again, that crew is from all different kinds of backgrounds, diverse backgrounds. But they're learning those skills. In some cases, they're developing those leadership skills. And at the same time, they're doing all these things, like now they're getting $2,700 a month minus taxes, and they've got to learn how to save and how to, really work that budget. And many, for the first time, are learning how to develop a personal budget and how to spend their money and not be out of money like me from check to check. Next slide, please. So, we have just a great history, alumni of folks that have come through the Conservation Corps and all different walks of life. And next slide, please. Itzel was in our Energy Corps at our NARWAC program. You can't tell, but he's like standing on top of a wind turbine about 240 feet high. And, this is, he got this experience by participating in our Energy Corps program, where we connected him with some of those potential employers or partners. And now he's traveling the United States as a wind mill technician, working in wind and solar. Next slide, please. Different person, Jason was a foster youth, came from the foster youth system, grown up in the foster youth system. Didn't finish his high school diploma, got his high school diploma with us, and really excelled and took that experience in the CCC, and then got a job at with the California State Parks, and really is still thriving and doing well at California State Parks. Next slide, please. And then just to demonstrate the kind of, we take folks from all walks of life. We take folks that are just as involved. We take folks that have been successful. I think about, out of the 1,600 young folks, probably at least 5% come to us with a college degree or an AA degree. And so in this case, Joseph came to us with a BA degree, but he wanted to put the work in. He wanted to be a firefighter. So he joined our Magalia Fire Center, spent, I think, 2 seasons with us, and then got hired by CAL FIRE. So he was educated, but he also worked hard. And he was also, more importantly, he was willing to learn, and he was willing to commit to the challenges that were put before him. Next slide, please. So the way that you all can help is, you probably wouldn't hire a crew, but you might refer us to some of those other sponsors and agencies that do work with us or that we partner with. Next slide, please. And you can help young folks. And I think that's the purpose or point of this discussion is, as we're talking, again, you've probably heard this. If you talk to me, you've heard it, and you've probably seen it in some of our literature. The California Conservation Corps is not for everyone, but I believe that, and the spiel or the talk that I have with folks, in fact, I just had one yesterday at our Solano Center, you got to try stuff. You got to be open to, trying new things. And we're going to ask you to do a lot of things. Some of them are going to be hard. None of them are going to be unsafe or unhealthy for a young person. But it's if you first, have that attitude that you're willing to learn, and maybe you don't want to necessarily change your life, but you want to get back on course again, then the Conservation Corps might be your place. Next slide, please. And so again, you can provide. I'd be happy to speak to individuals. Again, I think because of the closure of DGJ sites, I think I've been talking nonstop to probation offices since the first of the year, and in particular in the last month. And I'll give you an example. I worked closely with the LA County DJJ, and this Monday, I took 4 judges, probation officers, public defenders, alternative sentencing lawyers at a tour and visit of our Camarillo Fire Center. We've done the same at our Los Pinos Center. I took a group of probation officers from Sacramento. I didn't take them, but I arranged to have them visit our Placer Center. So I'm open to, and we have other recruitment staff that are open to speak to you individually or your probation office, or even if you want to take the next step, an actual tour of a facility, non-residential or residential site. Particularly, I think my interest here is, particularly with probation and parole, is that, that's been the challenge when we wrote legislation where the CCC could enroll young folks on probation or parole. The challenge was that then the person, in many cases, would have to get approval from the probation officer or DAPO or parole to work outside the county, because every day or many days, a project is working outside of the county where the person comes to work each day. And definitely for emergencies, we move outside the county, and we have to do that with some expediency and move quickly. So that's, again, the point here is that we're really willing to talk to folks. This presentation is going to be shared with all of you that have an interest in looking at it again. Next slide. There's our number, our email address, and you're welcome to email me directly as well. California Conservation Corps, here to serve. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was a wealth of information. I'm going to leave this slide up for a moment because I know it has some contact info, and I think the previous slide did too. So I'll bring that one up again as well. But in the meantime, I will just remind everyone, this is definitely going to be our Q&A portion. So if you did want to drop a question in the chat or use the raise your hand feature, and we have our first question. Great. So Mary Gonzalez, I'll let you kick off our Q&A.
Yes, good afternoon. I did have some question in regards to the culinary programs and the additional career training as well. Is this part of the California Conservation Corps where it's inclusive within the program as well, or is this additional linkage to other vocational schooling?
It's inclusive. And so a person first starts by joining the Corps, although they can specify that they want to join just the culinary arts program. And folks go in both directions. They join the Corps, work on the crews, and then maybe they develop an attraction towards the culinary arts. And so then they join the culinary arts program, or apply for and join their culinary arts program at the site that they're at, or they can, like I said, join specifically to be in the culinary arts program. And those would be, let me be clear, the culinary arts program exists at our 9 residential centers. So obviously they're not at our non-residential centers.
And so it would be the residential centers. Okay.
Correct.
And then are there any background issues that preclude an individual from joining?
We take folks on probation and parole. And the California Conservation Corps director, that's me, has the discretion to take folks with a felony. Generally, we do not accept folks, but I would look at each one individually, but we do not accept folks that have had a sexual assault offense, arson, or they've escaped from prison.
Okay, thank you very much.
And I believe-
Roxana, don't ask me hard questions, okay?
I'm not sure. Roxana, did you have your hand? I think someone else did have their hand
Oh,
up. And
I'm sorry. She put her hand down,
Oh, she did. Okay.
or
We
she
can come
moved.
back to you, Roxana, if you're at a place where maybe you can't ask your question right now. So we have plenty of time. So we'll go to a question in the chat. There was someone attempted to refer an 18-year-old who was in extended foster care, and they had a pending court date, and that prohibited them from participating. So I'm anticipating, because there wasn't the ability to bring them back for the court date, but could you share a little bit about that?
Yeah, that's where it gets a little trickier. You know, if they're, it sounds like if they were assigned outside the county where they were living, so they can choose a preference of site. So let's say, just hypothetically, a person, foster youth was living in LA County, they could ask to request to be at our Camarillo Center, or maybe even our Los Pinos Center, again, up above Lake Elsinore. Neither one of those are still very close to downtown LA, but they could be easier. They could also start with the core, and then they could say, they could make that, they should notify their core member, their staff, that, hey, you know, I've got a future court date, and then if they can get there, or if they can somehow arrange to get there, we absolutely would let them off. And certainly if it's a Zooming, that makes it even easier, but that would be a challenge. They can, even if a person has a court date, and that's sometimes an issue with some of our DJJ youth, that you know, as long as they can arrange it in time. The biggest challenge, you know, generally they're not going to have a vehicle, so that might make it tough to make that court date. But people can take time off, you know, whether it's for a doctor's visit or a court date, just as long as it's arranged and scheduled in advance.
Hi, this is Karen from Nevada County. I put that question on, and they didn't really even ask. It didn't even come down to whether or not he had transportation. It was more the issue was that he was still involved in the legal system, even though it was through an extended foster care program. And so we didn't even get to the point of applying, because it was just a matter of, well, he has pending court dates.
Yeah, and so, you know, that shouldn't be, and so you have my number now, and or even if you forget me, the recruiter that the person was working with, hopefully they weren't the roadblock, but it shouldn't be that way. And so if that person is still interested, you should contact me, and we'll figure out how to do this.
Thank you. And then, like you mentioned before, if they have a record, that does not necessarily, that does not make them not eligible. Is that correct?
That's correct. I'll give you an example. We just enrolled a young woman, a felony, second-degree murder at our Los Pinos Residential Center. It's going to be a challenge for her because she's been locked up for 5 years. But we think she's got has a lot of support, and she also has support of her lawyer. And yes, you know, I'm open to second, third, fourth, fifth chances for young folks.
That's
But also try to be very clear with them that, you know, now you've got freedom. And oh, by the way, I'm paying you $2,700 a month minus taxes. In this case, I think I could say this: the judge made kind of an internal agreement with the DJJ probation youth, that I'm not going to let you leave the site, because our sites, they're not secure. We have 24 hours, 7 day a week coverage or security. But, you know, if you're not tired from working a long day and going to class and doing all the other things, and you choose to go out, it's lights out or quiet time at 10 o'clock at, I think, all of our residential centers. But, you know, young folks, they might just, if they want to go out and run the streets and think they can come back and still be prepared and work and ready to work a full day the next day, you know, so be it. But yes, I am really pushing this because I think it's important for young folks, and I think it's particularly important for our DGJs. I should also add that the California Conservation Corps also partners or collaborates with CAL FIRE, and so this would be for the older folks, CAL FIRE and DAPO or Parole to run the Ventura Training Center. So that's 5 years ago, we converted a fire conservation camp to Ventura Training Center, where we have right now about 80 young adults or adults, any age, 18 to 50. We even have a couple of 40-year-olds, one 50-year-old that are trained to be firefighters. And that, if they do a season there, again, they're very likely to get placed with the fire services. We have a recidivism rate of less than 10%, I think less than 5%, and a fantastic placement rate. And I think, in this case, young adults or adults are thriving and really taking advantage. Again, they have, the challenges that young folks coming off probation or parole. They have a place, a roof over their head. It's safe and sound, 3 meals a day, 7 days a week. And they've got a job. It's not paying great, $2,700, which is really, that's a stipend, not an hourly wage. That's equivalent to the $15.50 per hour minimum wage now. But they have benefits, and they have a lot of support. That VTC site has support from Anti-Recidivism Coalition and a lot of other support in personal development. So long answer, but if in doubt, this question comes up. When a person applies, and I'll say this now, if a person is interested in the Conservation Corps, they go online, fill out an application, submit the application, and then they're told to attend a 1-hour Wednesday orientation session. And they'll probably go over some of the same things, but more about the rules and expectations. And then if they're still interested, they're assigned to a recruiter. And when they're assigned to that recruiter, then they'd say, okay, I'm on probation, and this is why I'm on probation. This is how long I'm on probation. And then eventually they'll talk to our director of our recruitment or me. I have final say and approval for all folks coming to the CCC on probation or parole.
Thank you, Bruce. That was actually kind of dovetails to a couple of our other questions in the chat that we'll get to, and then Jose will go to you next. But a couple of the questions were, you covered enrollment, the process for that, and we can certainly send out a link to the application when we send out the PowerPoint. But there's also a question about the minimum age and the maximum age. Could you review that information as well?
Yeah, 18 to 25. Sometimes, if you're almost 18, we'll take you, if you're going to the next month or a couple months, you're going to be 18. And then as long as you enroll in the Corps while you're 25, because you can stay up to 3 years, you enroll in the CCC for 1 year, but you can extend or stay up to 3 years, pending your advancement, or as long as you're continue developing your school or your education or your personal development or your leadership skills, you could stay up to 3 years. And then again, 29 if you're a vet.
And just while we're staying on the eligibility, and there's another question about juvenile sex offenders. So I think you mentioned sex offenses are prohibited, but that a felony alone outside of those and arson are not eligible, but other felonies, there is the ability to review those and accept those on a case-by-case basis.
Yes.
Okay. Jose, let's go to your question.
Thank you, Bruce. You actually answered a lot of the portion of this, but one of my questions was, what do you take into account as far as the criteria, to make those exceptions for youth that do have a felony? What just so that we have an idea of what is it that you're looking for, and the different barriers that can probably prevent someone from you making that exception. Of course, we can think, someone who's struggling, but that environment that they're in could be the struggle. They change the environment, it could be something much more successful. So that's what I'm kind of trying to look at. Or
We depend a lot on the probation officer or the lawyer or the counselor or whoever. You know, we work in LA County, we're working with a group, you know, that also helps in that process. So we depend a lot on somebody that's had some experience. Now, I understand that, you know, I've been fooled more than once. And I also understand that a person might say one thing while after they've been locked up for 5 years. Yeah, I'm going to do that. Yeah, I want to do that. And the first day they're out, it's like, wow, I'm free. I can do whatever I want. And so, but I try to talk to every person that applies to us that's on probation or parole. And again, I've been fooled more than once, but I really, you know, believe in the person, and especially, you know, if they've either through therapy or counseling or just growing up, you know, that they believe, they understand what restorative justice is, and they if not atoned, they've at least understand you know, some of the mistakes they've made in life, you know. And I'm really easy when they talk about moms and pops, you know, but particularly moms. So but it really depends a lot on, you know, just where the person is according to you all and according to what, you know, what comes out in that interview.
Thank you, Bruce.
Bruce, you mentioned a couple different specialties within the conservation corps. I know that like forest health and the energy. Can a young person seek to specialize in something upon enrollment to say, I want to be in this, I want to learn this specific thing, or is it just a matter of what happens to come available as they progress through the program?
Two answers. One, they're generally not available to those specialty programs until they've served like 3 months. And that's really to establish, you know, a good track record and work habits. The other, though, is that some folks hear about, oh, that site has a forestry core program, or definitely that site, the Camarillo site, has a fire service type 1 firefighting program that I've heard from my buddies, or the word is out that, you know, they have a good program. So they enter at an entry-level position with the intent of specializing, eventually specializing. But the other cool thing, and another thing that I say to all the young folks is that, you know, I get it where a 19-year-old, they may not, you know, they've never experienced this stuff, or they don't know about this stuff. They've only known their world. So, you know, we try to expose them to a lot of different things, even emergencies. But, you know, one day they might be working clearing fuels in El Dorado County up in Tahoe, and the next week they might be responding to emergency in Corcoran, filling sandbags and doing levee repair. Or then they might go on a spike out of state to respond to emergency in Florida. And so those kinds of different experiences are all what we try to do. This next weekend, we're doing a weekend, one of those volunteer trips. We're going to do a hike and overnight camping at Angels Island, you know, the Bay Area, where they'll not just do some trail construction. They'll learn about the history of the immigrants, of Chinese immigrants that came to California. Later in the week, I'm going to lead a service project at Manzanar, where again they'll work on they'll do an excavation project with the National Park Service, but they'll learn many for the first time the history of the imprisonment of Japanese in 1942. And we've just spent a number of 5-8 different crews got to work a week in Allensworth State Park and learned about, you know, the only city, or only Black-owned city, the only Black-owned founded city, and just, you know, that kind of culture and history education, as well as learning how to construct a trail and build a fence and those other things. Those are all part of the experience.
I have a couple other questions while folks may be thinking of theirs, and certainly I think we answered everyone that's in the chat as well. Do you currently have any waiting lists for either the non-residential or the residential programs?
Our waiting list is greater for our residential programs, not as much for our non-residential, but it all depends. Like, so right now, you know, I think when school lets out, more people apply. Some want to do it just for the summer, and hopefully they stay. But then we're also placing a lot of folks, particularly in the fire services. So in May and June, you know, the fire season, starts up. So we're placing probably 200 young folks that were Corps members last fire season. They're getting hired by United States Forest Service and CAL FIRE. So we're filling behind those positions. So it's always just good to ask, but generally the waiting list has increased kind of since the first of the year. We were struggling just like everybody else in the past 3 years of COVID, but we kind of turned the corner, I think last year, and then we took another hit like everybody after every holiday, but it's been much better. As folks have returned to work, we raised our stipend to $2,700, and I think folks are just the word is out, and there's opportunities to be had at the CCC.
Well, and you just did a perfect segue to another question. You mentioned the stipend. And so for those young people that do not come in with a bank account, what is the process that you utilize do you help them establish a bank account? Is it something that you hold in a trust, or how does that work?
No, we unfortunately don't have direct pay. Because they're not, I want to be very clear, the Corps members are not civil servant positions. They're special classification. I mean, they're essentially like seasonal hires. So they get a check after a month, and it's probably a 2-week delay after serving 1 month, just like other state agencies. But we do financial literacy classes. And we help folks set up bank accounts if they've never had a bank or checking account. And we have kind of life skills presentations on topics like this all the time. But basically, they get the check and it's theirs.
Got it. One other question while folks are thinking, you mentioned the High Country, High Sierra program, and that's 5 months up in the high mountains there. And so I'm just curious, for those 5 months, do they have periods where they come back down and can contact family, or are they really, as you said, off the grid for the entirety of that time?
They're basically off the grid. They can come down, but come down to the flatland or get closer to civilization or a store, but that would mean hiking out like 7 or 8 miles. Over steep and rugged terrain, but they can. Most choose not to. Most choose instead to adventure out and check out some other meadow, or check out some other hilltop or mountaintop, or just relax and rest for the weekend. We do have all the sites, though. We have radio satellites. The supervisor has radio satellites, and we've on occasion had to helivac a person out from the backcountry, high country. So we have that kind of safety backup, but basically for the young folks. And there's a way, we tell like family, or we tell friends of the person that's participating in the backcountry, there's a number that they can reach. And if we have to, we can get that information in for an emergency for that individual, so they can contact somebody that's trying to get a hold of them.
Great, thank you. We did get a question. I think we may have touched on this. I know they need to be 18 for the program, but for example, a 17-year-old who's on the verge of turning 18, say they're a few months away from that birthday, they can initiate the application process prior to turning 18. Yes,
that's why, like I said, for instance, COMET is the orientation that we do for every new Corps member. So our Los Pinos site, they're not having a COMET in June because they're filled up. So the person would apply now, or if the timing wasn't just right, then they might have to wait a month. But they would, as long as they're close, they should apply now if they're interested. And then they would either have to hold back, or the timing will work out where they would be 18 when they enrolled.
Thank you. And we are getting near the end of our questions. So if anyone does have any questions that they haven't asked yet, please post them in the chat or raise your hand. One other question I wanted to raise was if a young person starts the program, decides 5 months later, it's not for me at this point in time, and so they choose to exit, and say a year later, they're still within the age range, they're 20 years old, can they reapply?
Yes, we have what we call a second chance program, so they can reapply for good or negative reasons. So there is an exception to that. If they completed 1 year, then it's a little harder to reapply. But if they did less than a year, and it can be gone for however amount of time, just as long as they're still within that age range.
And then there is a question about how long the waiting list is. How long does someone stay on the waiting list before they're placed? Is there an average?
It could take anywhere from a month to 3 months at max. And the biggest hang up there, I failed to mention, every person we require a background check. So sometimes that takes a little longer. And they do a health and physical when they're enrolled. So again, those two things might hold up placement. And then sometimes depending if we're again full and we have a waiting list, it might take a couple months longer. But anywhere from a couple weeks to a couple of 3 months.
And a few others. From the point in time, and I apologize if you mentioned this, the point in time that a person first submits their application, assuming there isn't a waiting list for this hypothetical, what is the average from submittal of application to actually arriving at a program?
2 to 4 weeks. If the timing is just right, they could do it in 2 weeks. Again, the biggest hang up is the background check, which we pay for. But that's been a particular challenge with the DJJ youth that I've been working with. It's hard for them to get that at the DJJ site. It's a little easier when they were transitioned to transitional living, a secured site. But 2 weeks at minimum, and that'd be super fast. Probably the average is more like 4 weeks.
Okay. And I know that sometimes, if an individual is on medication, just like for a routine health, just maintenance, is there a prohibition about being on medication, or can an individual be on medication and participate in the program?
Absolutely. And our biggest challenge there is sometimes, folks start with us, and maybe because of the site they're located, they don't maintain that medication. But we do everything possible to help them keep up on that kind of stuff, as well as, we need to know that in advance. And usually that's in the medical review, but absolutely a person can work with us and be on medication. That's also, part of the role of the physical is that, we disagree sometimes. We tell the physician or nurse, these are the expectations. And sometimes folks will sign off and say, great. And then they get to us and we're like, well, you can't hike. And so you're going to need to hike. Or this could be stressful at times. And so, but we absolutely take folks on medication.
Great. I'll just pause one last time in case there are any last questions that anyone wanted to ask. Please do post them in the chat, or feel free to raise your hand. As we mentioned earlier, we will be sending out this PowerPoint, and we will also send a link to the Conservation Corps website for folks, so that if you have someone that you want to reach out to soon and have them enroll and send that information, so you will have that handy. And so we'll be sure to include that in the email. Pause one last time, just in case. Then Director Saito, I want to really thank you for your time this afternoon. A lot of great information. I suspect you will be hearing the Corps will be hearing from probation across the state into the future for opportunities for young people. So really appreciate you taking the time this afternoon to spend with us, review the program, take our questions, and look forward to the ongoing partnership and collaboration with you.
You are absolutely welcome. And to everyone on this call, thank you for your service and all that you do for young folks in the state of California. Thank you.
Thank you.